Hey, what do you think of that new music for my intro? Welcome everybody to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. I'm on the road again today, so it'll be a little different format, but my name is Tom, and tonight's episode is entitled The Contradiction That Is the State, Election Style. Thanks for tuning in to the show tonight. We have another great show in store for you. Lots of good information. I hope you'll find it interesting. Let me get back here. Since I always have trouble doing two things at once, cut the music out of there. I guess tonight's show will be centered on the election frenzy and all that good stuff since the debates. The Fox News debate is showing up here in 2 more nights. So I wanted to connect a variety of seemingly distant or unrelated topics, including that frenzy, which is, the horse race over polling and the upcoming GOP debate, which, again, by the way, has the top 10 candidates only were available. I think there's 16 or 17 total in the field for the GOP now. So obviously 6 or 7 got knocked out, and they're, of course, the ones who got knocked out are claiming that they'll get into the next round on the main stage. Apparently there's a sub-debate for those that didn't make the top 10. And anyways, I want to tie that to, give me some slack here, recent discussion I had over property regulations, as in real property regulations. And then we're going to get into a little bit about the funding that the GOP contenders are battling for and some of the stuff that goes on there. And remember that the chat room is open if you're listening live. So I'd love to have your comments in there. Again, I'm all alone tonight, so I don't do as good a job as paying attention to that as I would like. But they're in there permanently, so I can always respond to them. So please be active if you feel like you want to. Where I usually do an overview of the show, the political philosophy of freedom or liberty, on this episode I wanted to concentrate more about the system, in quotes. And I think it's a good topic. I know some people will say, well, you're just criticizing the system that we have, and surely I'm going to do that. I hope within the context of this show I'm going to drive out some alternatives that exist that have not been tried on a national scale, which is a weird thing actually to say, but I think what I really want to do is not necessarily convince you, yes, that's what we're going to do right now. I think that's too tall of an order. I just want to present the ideas to you and maybe get you to think about it and maybe start a real conversation, whether it be in a future show about the topic or an exchange on Facebook or whatever, or maybe I can direct you to some other resource that will help you. On this, there's an infinite number, the system that we have today, again, I'm speaking of, it has a number of shortcomings, with it, its systems of laws, its rules, and its regulations that are created by man's whim. And I know some of you are going to take offense to that word whim, but we'll get back to that in a sec. And to some degree endorsed by popular support, right? The mass of regulations, I hope people realize, aren't created directly from the ballot box, right? You're not directly voting on regulation. You're, in a lot of cases, voting for a candidate who articulates that, use that loosely, a position on a number of items, right? So you are voting for a person who claims they may do this, and even that could be a reach, right? So you're not directly voting on these laws, rules, regulations, etc., that are, I would argue, are created by man's whim. And I know some people will say, no, they're certainly not. It's systematized. Some will say further and say it's systematized by the Constitution. And I would argue the Constitution clearly is of no limit. So to cite the Constitution as a restriction, yeah, it may be like trying to swim in a little bit of muddy water, but you can still, I don't know if that's a good analogy, but you can still continue, and that's what's happening. And I would argue, by and large today, with no restriction, these rules are just added to the books. The constitutional limits are largely fictitious. But think about this larger. Again, go back and be convinced, if you will, if that's where you are, that this system is a legitimate, it is just, however you want to describe it. But I think you cannot disregard this next point. You know, whenever a group, a class, we'll call them the rulers, have obtained the authority to rule over others, right? The rulers have, in fact, the authority to rule over, that's the nature of calling them rulers. That group is, of course, subject to influence, right? And let me go on a little deeper. Why would they be subject to influence? Say, no, they're all good people, they went there to do the right thing. Well, I think we could clearly say that's not been historically the case, but I'm questioning why, and that, to me that's more important than historically what has actually happened, because we can argue over history. But why would someone come there? Why would a new group of fellows and gals show up there, you know, with the intent, maybe the true intent to do the right thing, but then not succeed at doing it? And I would argue a number of reasons. You know, people seek to improve their lives with the least amount of effort. Right? So if you had the authority and you wanted to improve your life, you could do a few things that maybe benefit you at the expense of others, right? And in large degree, what are people going to do about it? If the system is seen as just, well, then it's just by definition, right? And also those who are ruled seek relief in their subjection to their rulers, right? They're going to try to wiggle their way out of it. Do you ever hear of tax loopholes, right? People trying to wiggle their way out. Now, I'm not condemning them for them. Actually, I would congratulate them for doing such. But how most people see it, right? They're trying to wiggle their way out of paying their fair share, in quotes, right? But even beyond that, a number will seek to use the authority of the state to exercise, you know, authority over their rivals. Right? So even if I'm not the candidate who becomes the office holder, I can attempt to influence them, right? I may want to encourage some legislation that may benefit my firm or a firm I have interest in versus a rival, right? So there are a lot of, you know, maybe broadly people call this politics, right? Chicanery that goes on, the influence to influence the rulers to get the laws to benefit me or my friends or whoever I want to benefit, right? And just to back up the idea that people seek loopholes, I believe one of the latest things, you know, was the $15 an hour minimum wage, and I believe a number of unions are now pushing to exempt themselves, although they were actually pushing for the $15 an hour minimum wage, and now they're trying to exempt themselves from it, right? So this could be another example of pushing legislation. Say, well, why would they want to push legislation to do this? Well, because maybe in this case they're going to try to exempt themselves at a later date, right? Use their influence again to exempt themselves. It happens, right? These are not isolated incidences as part of my spiel here tonight. A common criticism to a free society is that of no monopolist of ultimate decision-making. Think of that. I realize your modern-day Republicans, Democrats don't use that language, but that is what it is. It's not only is the state a monopolist of ultimate decision-making, they also have the power to tax. In other words, they'll tell you what it's going to cost you. There's no negotiation there, right? So given that, is that people say, well, if you don't have that controlling authority, right, that monopolist of ultimate decision-making, corporations, I don't know, people with a lot of money, people with unusually unique talents, etc., I don't know, they would be at an inherently superior position to, quote-unquote, control society. And I would argue, what do I mean by control society? And we could actually do an entire show on what that means. I would argue a guy with money currently would, in a free society, have no power or authority over me. He couldn't make me buy anything. He couldn't make me not buy anything. whereas the state, of course, does have that authority. They can penalize me, incarcerate me, even ultimately kill me if I don't do what they say. But as Tanya likes to use, the Tyson Foods guys can't jail me for buying their chicken or not buying their chicken. They hold no authority over me. But corporations are bashed frequently. Now, I'm not saying they're angels, because they have this relationship with the state is really what the problem is there. Again, in a free society, these corporations would hold no authority over me. But to some degree, they do today, because they have a relationship with the state, of which me, private individual Tom, does not. Right? So they have influence over the giant club that is over my head. So the point is that, people say we can't have we cannot go without a controlling authority, because we have to be able to hold these corporations, these tycoons, these wealthy people in check. Well, I'm going to also argue that the reason they have a greater influence is because of their relationship with the state, because in fact the state exists, right? So you cannot separate these problems, I think, as a lot of people do with fat cats, if you will, shortly, without recognizing the relationship with the state. And how do they do this? They do this in support for various taxes, tariffs, trade pacts, laws, regulations. We can go on and on and on with this, right? And then, in my previous example, then they try to exempt themselves. They try to impose overhead, essentially, on the whole industry. In a lot of cases, when they've done analysis that, hey, our competitors will not be able to withstand this overhead, so we'll be in a better position. We'll have pricing power. They're all going to have to raise their prices. We'll do so as well, and we'll be in a more competitive position than they will. Right, so there's a lot that goes on here, and I guess I would encourage people to really consider that when they offer their condemnation without any support. And I'm not saying I've got the world's best support, the world's best argument here in this specific case, but I do actually believe I have the best argument possible in arguing for the political philosophy of freedom. But again, that's another 10 shows. And then people say, well, the next benefit, okay, even if I learn to embrace the political philosophy of freedom, if we switch to that now, well, all the fat cats are going to have a big head start on us. And that is true. And that is a little sticky thing. Well, I shouldn't say little. That is a difficult thing to overcome. How to do it, I'm not really going to address that in this show. A number of people have done so. But yes, many people go, well, so then we cannot adopt the political philosophy of freedom because there's these difficulties in transitioning. Well, these are problems of statism that you're now basically putting on the political philosophy of freedom, and I think that is disingenuous at best, right? Mostly, in large part, the criticism comes from the elite and connected because they don't want to give up their authority. In a free society, they wouldn't have it. And if you've worked hard to attain it, you don't want to give it up, right? So it is precisely the protection that the ordinary citizen seeks, right? That's why he supports the state. In some cases, I'm not saying those are the only reasons that the ordinary citizen supports the state. You're undoubtedly influenced by tradition, your indoctrination, and boy, tons of other factors that I can't even list here. But it's there. So think about it, that the ordinary citizen claims to seek this protection, this controlling authority, which is the one that actually controlling authority is influenced and co-opted by the large corporations that this ordinary citizen wants to protect himself from. They use the state to bash you over the head with the bat, right? So part of this show, I want to point out continually this contradiction that people think. And I'm not really even going to the philosophical interests of liberty here. I want to do it on a more of a practical level here that people can maybe see this. So we're going to take a look at how this happens and how it works, or maybe doesn't work, if depending on your view, in our upcoming discussion. So please enter the discussion in our chat room in the event you're listening live. I see that Tanya's in there, and welcome, Tanya. Thanks for joining me in the chat. That was very kind of you to tune in. And we also, of course, welcome your comments on our Facebook page at Annoying Peasant Radio. And hey, I got to do something that I haven't done for a long, long time. It's a promo. So this is just going to be so cool. Here's a promo for Freedom Talk Radio. Check it out.
freedomtalkradio.co.uk. This is the most diverse, most amazing, one of the funniest radio stations you could ever listen to on the internet. I've heard so much stuff from the ups to downs, the lefts, the rights,
the politics, the non-politics, the politics, whatever you want to call them. It's
All right, well, welcome back to Annoying Peasant Radio. This is Tom. I'm running the show here by myself. And actually, we are live from one of the runways at Atlanta's Jackson Hartsfield Airport. So I get to have fun a little before the show and after the show to watch airplanes. Kind of my thing. It's a fun thing. Oh, British Airways just landing right now. Anyway, more than you wanted to know. Sorry. Again, thanks for joining me. I hope you'll enjoy. We're going to, kind of get a little into the election stuff and all the stuff that goes in there. And again, connect this back to this very issue that people who seek the state for protection are the ones who actually get abused by the state. But we'll get there, and let me develop that as the show progresses. I just wanted to do a quote for the day, and I thought a very apropos one. I think I saw this on Facebook earlier today, if I remember, maybe yesterday. A quote from Dr. Mary Ruwart, and I think she had a good one, and here it is. She just says, "A free market is the only way to control corporations. As long as government has the power to regulate business, business will control government by funding the candidate that legislates in their favor." Again, I'm trying to point out that you see, whenever you have this controlling authority, right, they're subject to influence. And who's in a better position to influence them than people with wealth? Ordinary citizens who are probably the lowest guy on the list, or the least possibility of influencing the state. So I just want to point that out again, and we'll keep going with that as the show develops. Quickly, I just wanted to do some announcements. Hey, here it is, my advertising. Northwood's mom will be with us on August 18th. That's 2 weeks from tonight, so don't miss that show. And I know Tanya has been prepping for a while on this, and she always has great stuff, so mark that as a special spot on your calendar. Agorafest 2015 is at the Villa Maria Conference Center and Retreat, and again, that's coming up very soon, September 24th to the 27th, so save the date. I will get Nick on. I'm going to aim for August 18th or maybe the 25th to get him on and talk about the cool stuff that's going on. He's got a bunch of stuff. He's got a naturalist going to tell you how to survive in the woods. They're going to do drone races. They got all kinds of cool stuff. And then just a couple of reminders. Watch the Facebook page, of course, facebook.com/AnnoyingPeasantRadio. There's a variety of postings that go on there. Tanya, Trigger, Tim, and Cassie, I want to thank them for their efforts. They do a wonderful job. And sometimes they make you laugh, so check those out. And again, our next show will be next Tuesday evening, August 11th at 7 p.m. Central, so please mark that on your calendar and join us. Some really quick news items that I thought is a little interesting, have really not much to do, well, nothing to do with political philosophy of liberty, is Apple stock fell 3.2% today. And you think, big deal, 3.2%. I mean, yeah, if you were invested in it, it's a bigger deal, of course. But check it out. 3.2% fall in value represents $113 billion. That's why I put it on the news, just because, man, that's a big number. So anyway, interesting. And then another thing I saw, and again, unrelated, but I just thought interesting, if you get any kick out of the weather whatsoever, there's a monster typhoon. It's well publicized coming to Southeast Asia. You might want to just to see it on a map, and the size of it is truly amazing. So I guess for you people on the camp of the climate change, global warming, whatever you call it today, is there more proof of global warming. That's my, what was his name? Joe Souchere. More proof of global warming. Yeah, for those of you not in the Minneapolis area, you don't know what that is. Joe Souchere, very entertaining is the word. Thank you. So tonight, I wanted to focus a little more on election campaigning, right? And it's a result of the attempt for each and every person to have a say in his governance, right? That's how most of us know that. But, there's a couple of weird things in that. First of all, well, if each and every person has a say, how's the controlling authority going to bend and flex to every single person's wants, desires, needs, right? That seems like an impossible task, which of course it is. But there are other things at stake, just to use some wording back on you. People believe I have inalienable rights, right? Inseparable rights that can't be messed with. They're inherently yours. I would argue they're yours by your very nature. But again, we'll leave that aside for a second. But why would they be subject to a vote, right? Should they be? I want to return to talk about that just in a little bit of an ancillary way. I want to talk about a topic that we talked about a few weeks ago. And that is, remember publicly funding stadiums? Well, Dr. Michael Hurd, interesting guy, he had an article out just the other day or two back. He says, reason number, this I'm going to offend a lot of my pals in Wisconsin here, reason number 16,491. Why Republicans are losers. That's the name of his article. So, of course, that caught my eye. I had to read that just because I saw the title. But Scott Walker facilitated, this is the short story here, right? Scott Walker facilitated about $250 million in taxpayer money funding a new Milwaukee Bucks stadium facility, and I assume there's ancillary buildings or suites or whatever in there, right? It's not solely a stadium, right? And the question is why? Why would he do this? Why would a guy who claims to, rely on the free market and promote it and tell us that that's the way to do things, capitalism, I can't summarize all things, right? But he's the free market guy going against those vicious Democrats who are socialists, who don't support the free market, right? You've heard the rhetoric. So his answer is, why would he do that? He says, it's good for the economy. Okay, so now I want to go a little bit to quote some from Dr. Michael Hurd, what he says about it. He says, speaking, Scott Walker should sell himself for what he is. Listen closely to this. He says, an advocate of government intervention in the economy, only with different priorities than the Democrats he opposes. Walker, like other conservatives, agrees with the Democrats on the most important thing. The public good comes before individual rights, private property, and capitalism. Any differences they have are secondary or unimportant. How could that not be true, what Dr. Hurd just said there? Right? That I'm quoting from his article. Think about that, and he's absolutely correct. He says Walker, like other conservatives, agrees with the Democrats on the most important thing. The public good comes before individual rights. That's a free market guy. That's how he's touted. That's what his supporters are yelling from the highest mountains, right? It's socialists, I'm quoting Dr. Hurd again, it's socialists who rationalize partial or complete takeovers of private funds for what they call the social good. Scott Walker does the same thing. Again, I'm still on the quote. I hate to rain on your parade, those of you who, in parentheses like me, want to see America become a free market economy and think someone like Scott Walker will take us there. He won't. So that's, I'll post Dr. Michael Hurd's article on the Facebook page. You want to read it. It's actually a good read. It's very short. It's very readable. Excellent thing. So again, this is just another example of how he's saying the voting process won't work for a variety of reasons. One is, I'm going to get a little deeper in, these fellas are influenced. They need to gain the money in order to get through the election cycle, to gain the authority, and then they will do what they have to make sure that they either A, get funding for the next go-around, B, repay guys for the funds they got for the last go-around, or they'll help court more money for more of their cronies, their friends, to get them in so they can pass the legislation that they want to pass. Right? And again, I just want to point out, the ordinary citizen is the one who really supports this system in numbers, right? By and large, in huge number. If those people walked away and said, this is ridiculous, we want nothing to do with this, this is legalized corruption. That's not what we expect from the state. We need to move on. If they did that and they embraced liberty, they embraced freedom, this would end immediately. But again, people support this, and I want to point out that on numerous occasions here, the incoherence of supporting such a system, right? So in the first place, these candidates, like the 10 who are on the stage, and by the way, I did want to mention those 10 here for you, just so you know. I believe this is fresh news, semi-fresh news. The top 10 who got on to the debate stage are, of course, Donald Trump, who I believe is the top polling, candidate here. Or I don't know if candidate's the right word. He's included with it's Jeb Bush, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who we just mentioned in an article, Texas Senator Ted Cruz, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, we talked about him a few weeks ago on the show, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, retired neurosurgeon Ben Carson. I haven't heard actually much about him lately. I like the man. He seems to be very likable. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, and Ohio Governor John Kasich. And I think Kasich is the last to join the field, by the way. So anyway, that puts out Carly Fiorina, the female that the GOP really wanted to have with them, right? Bobby Jindal, Rick Perry, who was in the race last go around. He didn't make the cut. Lindsey Graham, Rick Santorum, who won the Iowa caucuses, I believe, last time around. New York Governor George Pataki, and former Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore. And I don't think I missed anybody, but there could be more. There's so many candidates. So the candidates have to court this money. Why? Because they want to garner your attention, right? It takes money to do that. Why? Because people don't pay attention, which I'm not entirely upset with you for not paying attention to this system, because again, I think the system is fundamentally flawed from the start. So why would you pay attention to it? So anyway, but the weird thing is when they advertise, money actually apparently works. I'm not on the inside of these campaigns. I'm not in tune with the inner workings there. But apparently it works. That's why they try to court all this cash. One of the interesting ones was just this last weekend, if I recall correctly, some of the biggies in the campaign were in Orange County, California, I guess doing their little song and dance in front of the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers are kind of the Republican/libertarians, maybe, that are big money backers. This is from the Times Digest. I just wanted to point this out a little bit. There was, I think it's in the editorial, section. It was August 1st. It was the date of this one. It says, Republicans audition for big money. A definitive event in the plutocratic spending binge now engulfing presidential politics is taking place in Orange County, California this weekend, which of course was just this past weekend. The Koch brothers and 450 of their most affluent allies are auditioning a select group of Republican candidates who are vying to get a share of the whopping, and here's the number, $889 million pledged by these donors for the presidential race next year. Right? So, well, that's nice. And apparently, who was there? Donald Trump was there, and I'm scanning here closely to read. I believe Jeb Bush was there, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, and Carly Fiorina. And apparently Rand Paul, this is actually kind of funny, Rand Paul was invited, but I don't know if he showed up because he failed to impress at an earlier forum where he Ouch. According to this article, he criticized the oil and gas industry's tax benefits and endorsed tax incentives to repair urban blight. So that apparently was a no-no to say in front of those guys. So they apparently didn't ask him back. But check this out. There's another Times Digest article from the Sunday, August the 2nd, and I just wanted to point this out. We're talking about the influence, the money, where it comes from. Check this out. Just 130 or so families and their businesses provided more than half the money raised through June by Republican candidates and their super PACs. Right? And earlier in the article, they say fewer than 400 families are responsible for almost half the money raised in the 2016 presidential campaign, a concentration of political donors that is unprecedented in the modern era. So if you, again, you're going to insist, the ordinary citizen is going to insist, this is the method for you to have your say, I beg to differ. It's exactly the opposite of what you're aiming for is happening. You've set up a system where the big guys can get together and club you like a baby seal. How do you like that one for an analogy? Right? That's all I got to say, right? That is in fact what is happening. And I think people tend to support this, continue, I should say, to support this system out of their indoctrination, out of tradition, out of ultimately not really thinking about this. So you have to believe that with those donations comes the expectations of favor, right? Former President Jimmy Carter, who I can't tell you would be on the top of my favorites list. And except for now that I'm in Georgia at the moment, yes, maybe he's up there, right? But he says it should be illegal to use private money in elections as it invites cronyism. And I have that article here, and I wanted to chat about that here just for a little bit because I think it's interesting. People. He does, in fact, say some right things, but then he supports it with the wrong things. Why? Because he doesn't understand the political philosophy of freedom. And of course he doesn't, because he was a president. He sought the ultimate authority over the American people. He wouldn't be for freedom. He's definitely for statism. He wanted to exert his authority over you. That's why he sought that job. He's been controversial for a number of issues. In this article, it's called From the Rundown Live. He was on a talk show. I guess that's the name of the talk show. Milwaukee's, by the way, alternative talk radio. And I'm sick of hearing that alternative talk. Everybody's alternative, and they're all mainstream. So as soon as you see alternative, know that it's mainstream. But it's called the Rundown Live, Monday through Friday. Anyway, Carter was a guest on this show. To be honest, I don't even know who the host is on the show. I could find that out. But I'll put this article on the Facebook page so you can check it out. He cited a couple of, controversial things, we'll say. I don't think they're very controversial. One was he said that he didn't use email to converse with, dignitaries, especially foreign dignitaries, because he believed the NSA was spying on him. That was the first, big bombshell, big deal. We already know that the NSA is spying on all of us, and in more ways than most people understand, or they claim they don't care, which I can't understand that either. That's a little beyond me. So it's the Thom Hartmann program, anyway, that I'm referencing here. So he talks about unlimited corporate spending in politics, or he was asked about it, and this is what Carter had to say, so I want to go through this. He says, it violates the essence of what made America a great country in its political system. Now it's just an oligarchy, with unlimited political bribery being the essence of getting the nominations for president or to elect the president. And the same thing applies to governors and U.S. senators and Congress members, of course, anyone in an elective office. So now we've just seen a complete subversion of our political system as a payoff to major contributors who want and expect sometimes get favors for themselves after the election's over. The incumbents, Democrats and Republicans, look upon this unlimited money as a great benefit to themselves. No kidding. People would do stuff to benefit themselves. That was earth-shattering for me. Somebody who's already in Congress has a lot more to sell to an avid contributor than someone who's just a challenger. Well, of course, right? They have some infrastructure built in there, right? Even listen to this one from the same article from Joe Biden, right? The author here is saying, hey, Carter doesn't stand alone on this admission of what's going on. This is Joe Biden. Here's his quote. He says, you have to go where the money is. Now, where the money is, there's almost always implicitly some string attached. It's awful hard to take a whole lot of money from a group, has a particular position, and then you conclude they're wrong and vote no, right? It's very hard. And check this out, 29, I'm not misreading that, 29-term Congressman John Dingell, I believe it was from Michigan, if my memory serves. Here's his quote on this. He says, allowing people in corporate interest groups and others to spend an unlimited amount of unidentified money has enabled certain individuals to swing any and all elections. Any and all, he says, whether they are congressional, federal, local, state, etc., right? Rarely are these people having goals which are in line with those of the general public. History well shows that there is a very selfish game that's going on and that our government has largely been put up for sale. These are the guys in there telling you this. And still people insist, nope, this is the best system. Seriously, you believe we cannot do any better than this? Right? Carter goes on to basically say, hey, we understand the desire to influence the state is there, but what we should do is make the actual contributions illegal. Everything should be publicly funded. So what he's saying is more laws will correct this problem because we have this authority of creating laws. This is why people want influence. So now he's saying the solution is to pass more laws. Well, people want to influence that even more, right? Again, he's working on the theory of prohibition. And should we revisit prohibition for alcohol? Even current day, can I just ask, how's the drug war working? Prohibition is the answer. That's what you say? Think about this, people. Have we not yet learned that prohibition does not work? Obviously, Jimmy Carter hasn't. Or Carter knows full well that it doesn't work. But again, he wants to keep, maybe Carter is still very well connected in the government, and he wants to keep his pals in authority. Maybe as some other family members. I don't know. Is Amy Carter interested in politics? From my little limited knowledge, it appears that she's not, but you never know. Maybe he's keeping his avenues open there. So for whatever reason, he might also, again, because of his indoctrination, because of tradition, maybe he hasn't really thought about it. I don't know. I don't know the man. But, the correction to the basic problem of crony capitalism is not more laws. It's not more enforcement. It's not more authority, and it's not more government in general. The correction is less of all those things. And wait, I'm not saying less by turning the dial back, because I don't understand that whole battle for the dial to turn it down. When the next regime gets in, can't they just turn the dial right back up? It seems like A, not a solution, and B, the reason, I should say, it's not a solution is because why would you want someone to have authority to mess with the dial over you, right? When it is basically the dial is control over you. I want some people to be able to turn up and have more control over me, and I want some people to have less. I don't believe that the dial should exist, right? I have yet to hear what good reason there would be to have a dial. Why should one person have an authority over another? And again, I understand a lot of people are going to say, well, because then society becomes chaotic. I would argue the reverse is the case, but I got to leave that off the table to keep the show within a reasonable time frame. If you do have severe interest on that discussion, let me know on the Facebook. I'd be happy to have that with you. And think about this. Basically, the argument is, will there be no regulation? Right? That's kind of what this boils down to. And we got to have regulation, whether it be regulated markets, we have to have regular availability of products and services, etc. We have to have laws that govern us so there's fair play, right? You've heard all these things. I would argue the best regulator ever known in the market is the consumer. Right? Think about this for just a second. I mentioned this on a show or two or three ago. Really, you think that some guy sitting behind the desk, a bureaucrat, can regulate the market better than you can. So when you go buy your tomato, I'll use a simple case, and then people say, well, only the simple case doesn't work for everything. Yeah, I get that. But the consumer ultimately is the most stringent regulator. You're going to look at that tomato. You're going to contemplate the price first thing. The price is telling you lots of things that a lot of people don't realize because they're uneducated about economics. But one of the things it tells you, if they're expensive, clearly you go, seek alternatives. Don't even look at the tomatoes. The price is so high. If the price is within your realm of acceptability, you may look at those. You may scrutinize those tomatoes, right? Again, if the price is high, you may say, hey, I can get away with 2 tomatoes. I was originally intending on buying 10, but 2 will suffice, right? It tells you they're scarce. That's in a free market again. In a regulated market, I don't know what that number tells you. It's craziness, right? So the consumer is clearly more stringent. How could a regulator sitting behind a desk, who even comes out and inspects the fruit, as we're talking about tomatoes, how could he do it nearly as effective as consumers who are continually showing up at the market and continually analyzing and evaluating that product? It seems incredulous to me that anyone would say you got to have a regulator there, other than if they mean the consumer. I'm all for that. So if you're one of those who believes that more laws, more enforcement, more authority, and more government is the answer, ask yourself another question. If we've been doing that, how did we get to here? How do we have this problem? You mean to tell me no one thought of more laws, more enforcement, and more authority, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago? It hasn't come up until today? I would argue, where have you been? This is the process that we've been on. The spinning wheel that the gerbil or the lab rat or whatever's on, right? I can't remember the proper analogy for that, right? It doesn't work. And I'm not even addressing at this point the political philosophy of liberty, which would be the violation of your rights, and I'll get to that in a second. But that's the real issue here. But again, most people argue with me, well, it's the practical things that matter. And I argue, well, if you don't have the philosophy behind you, you can't make a principled argument for or against anything. You need to learn to do that. You need to understand that. And it's not that, well, I've found this and I just want you to know it. It's because this is an inherent nature. You need to know the world in which you live. I think it would serve you well. Again, that's another show or 10 shows. But earlier in the show, I said, hey, we're also going to connect this to seemingly disconnected things. I had a discussion with someone recently about real property regulation. This person happened to have a lake property, and they said, hey, I live on this lake, and I'm getting more frustrated because it appears that, the rich guys, the fat cats, are the ones who tend to get away with not having to comply with these regulations. I think in my neck of the woods, I guess that's actually accurate, neck of the woods, is you have to have a setback of your property 75 feet, and there is some loophole to get exempted from that. But it seems that the wealthy, the connected, the elites are the ones that do that. Why? They have the wealth, the influence to get what they want, right? You and I, or ordinary citizen, we don't have that. So this whole system, again, I'm trying to point out, is set up to go against the ordinary citizen. I got to run my little ad here again, my promo, I should say. And I'm looking at the chat room just before I do that, before we continue with the show. I see Alex says prohibition never fails. Yes, I see the sarcasm there. I get it, and I'm fully on board with you, Alex. Thanks for joining us tonight. All right, here we go. I got to do the promo for Freedom Talk Radio. Here we go. We'll be back with you in just 30 seconds.
freedomtalkradio.co.uk. This is the most diverse, most amazing, one of the funniest radio stations you could ever listen to on the internet. I've heard so much stuff from the ups, the downs, the lefts, the rights,
The politics, the non-politics, the schmolitics, whatever you want to call them.
It's great.
So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. This is the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. My name is Tom, and we just started talking about regulation in real property and a conversation that I had. And someone who had pointed out that, hey, these elites, the wealthy, have been able to escape property regulation. She actually pointed that inequity out to me. It wasn't like, so, and I think this is fairly common. People can see, quote unquote, the problem. Right? The next step is, well, what do we do about it? That's actually a permanent fix, not a Band-Aid, because Band-Aids don't work, right? And this person who suggested to me, I said, well, I tried to put the question on the person I was having the discussion with. I said, well, what should we do about that? I mean, first of all, if you think it's a problem, are you suggesting we actually do anything? And the answer was, more effective enforcement of the laws that already exist. That's what we need to do. And again, I would ask the same question that I asked earlier on the election cycle stuff. Is that the first time that suggestion has been made? Right? Think about this. I bet that suggestion in this even particular instance was made 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. What I'm saying is this basic problem is not a new problem. It doesn't work. So what's the remedy here, right? You, I guess, going to vote in this case, probably county representatives that are going to claim to do this more effectively. And I can't argue. Maybe at times it is a little more effective in its regulation or the way it applies these laws to people, right? There's less exemptions, less loopholes. But also remember, when there's no loopholes to these things, there's less flexibility here. And that's also not a good thing. And so what I'm saying is the state shouldn't exist. This shouldn't be part of our narrative. We shouldn't really have this anyway. And again, the basic argument for me would be your violation of your property rights. But think about this. More effective enforcement of the books, of the laws already on the books. Think about this. So we're going to repeat the same procedure that we've done before, right? More effective. I'm saying this argument has come up a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, right? We're going to expect better, more effective results this time. My question is why, right? Isn't that the definition of, insanity? Repeating the same procedure and expecting a different result? Right? We continue to do this. And that's what this show is about. The Annoying Peasant Radio Show is about basically, hey, take a step back. Let's maybe take a look at this in a different view or in a broader view that I don't think a lot of people use the broad view very frequently. So let's look at these things. And don't get your panties in a bundle about, well, I don't have the fix right now. That's not where I'm trying to get you to. What I'm trying to get you to do is first recognize that there is something wrong, inherently wrong, in the system we have now, right? We talked about the election stuff. We're going to talk about that a little bit more again. And then I'm trying to use the example of real property regulation at the moment, right? But these things are inherently wrong in the system. So if you can recognize that, then we can move on and do the other things. And I'll just very quickly go, okay, we got a problem. What can we do that will fix it permanently so that we aren't readdressing this, right? That's what we want. And then if we can embrace the political philosophy of liberty, I think it's the magic pill, if you will, that heals all of these types of wounds. It does not heal all wounds, but it certainly gets rid of all of these. But that regulatory body, getting back to the real estate, the property regulation in real estate, that regulatory body was intended supposedly to level the playing field, right? The ordinary citizen would have his protection. But here's someone again complaining that that's actually not what happens. It's that the elites get what they want, the wealthy, the connected, the ordinary citizen doesn't. But again, by numbers, the ordinary citizen overwhelmingly favors this more than the elites do in raw numbers, right? So it confounds me a bit because I see ordinary citizen clamoring for this regulation that's used to disadvantage him. And again, I'm trying to get you to look at this in a little different way. The rich, the influential elite, they're in the position to influence. Why? They have money. They have something that the regulators, that the office holders want, right? Wealth, in all its variety of forms. The ordinary citizen doesn't have that at his disposal. And I'm arguing, this is where I'm going to put it on maybe the listeners or maybe people who should be listening, is the ordinary citizen is ignorant of the political philosophy of freedom, ignorant of property rights rooted in self-ownership, ignorant, therefore, of creating a principled objection to these indiscretions, right? Bottom line is, why do you need to learn the political philosophy of freedom? Not solely because it fixes these problems or negates them or stops them from happening in the first place, is because it's simply inherent in your nature. I think you would be better off in a variety of spheres, not just this one. So let's go back to the campaign thing then. I'm going to try to again keep drawing this connection so it cements in our listeners. Here's going to be a weird thing for me to say, responding in a sense to what Jimmy Carter had to say, that it should be illegal for private donors in campaigns, right? It should all be publicly funded. Of course it should be legal for individuals and businesses to contribute to political campaigns. A restriction on this is prohibition, right? Which we spoke of a little earlier. But bigger than that, it's restricting donation is a violation of your property rights. If you actually own something, you have sole dominion over it. And if you want to give it to somebody, if you want to loan it to somebody, if you want to destroy it, whatever you want to do with it is your right. It's your inherent property right, if, of course, you're the legitimate owner. So it's not that donations should be eliminated. It's the state that should be eliminated. Carter, of course, is looking at this backwards, and again, for the reasons, the motivations that we mentioned that may be the case, or there may be others. It would be useless to contribute to a state that didn't exist. Not only useless, maybe impossible is the word, or an institution that was powerless to force compliance. Who's going to try to influence? I mean, nobody, to my knowledge, nobody's come to me to try to influence regulations, because I don't have that authority. So this would all go away instantaneously if this happened. If the state were removed, the influence is gone. So now all the people who complain that the big fat money cats have this power and influence over me, it wouldn't exist any longer. It would fix the problem. And again, I'm not making the philosophical argument. I'm making the practical argument. Right? Consider the countless programs that are of utmost importance in the political arena today, and I'm being sarcastic, right? Social Security. We have to manage the economy. We have to develop and continue to modify tax policy. We have to maintain and build the military for the ongoing threat, right? Who is the terrorists, right? Or the ongoing threat. By the way, that's one of the previous shows we did. You can't know who the war on terror is on because that's classified. So I hope you feel comfortable with that, right? And again, I think most people are. Yeah, we got to go kill them. I can't remember. I was just listening to something in the last week, and I said, I don't understand. Let's get on with it. Just start killing. And that's the words these politicians use. Let's just start the killing. Anyway, the military, the environmental policy that has to be, it's in the, public square, right? We have to debate this. We have to figure this out. Educational policy. Do I have to go free education for all? Do we want to talk Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders? And we could and I do want to do a whole show on Bernie Sanders, the contradictions of Bernie Sanders. That would just be a fun one. We have to police the banks. We have to police these nasty corporations. We have to police the citizenry. Sometimes we just have to shoot them, even if they don't have weapons on them. Right? We have to regulate essentially every aspect of life. And then there is, of course, the roads. The state is the only one capable of managing a road. I mean, we couldn't even comprehend the possibility of a private road, even though they exist. But That's craziness. And of course, the big thing at the moment, the biggest thing is poor Cecil the lion. And don't let me go there, although my joke was, oh my, is what I said. I get that from Wizard of Oz, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. All right, so I want to wrap this up. I hope you kind of got the gist of what I'm trying to get across here. And I want to really talk a little bit about a couple things, and then in closing, I'm going to get to Etienne de la Boétie. Just an amazing philosopher. So the question is, so what am I saying? What do I suggest? What do I advise? It's very simple. What should every single person do, not because of my advice, but certainly it is my advice, is you should learn the political philosophy of freedom. And if you don't like this saying that way, just learn what freedom is. What's the big harm in that, right? It's inherent in your nature. You should know how the world around you works from a very fundamental view. I think it would benefit you in a variety of spheres again, not just in the political sphere, not when we're talking about funding of campaigning, not just when we're talking about regulation in real estate property, right? It will help you in dealing with people, understanding that people have different incentives and motives and how that could influence them. I could go on forever on that. But freedom, or the political philosophy of freedom, is the only guide that remedies the situation that the citizen faces, and all people face as well. Almost everyone is governed, right? And the government creates this chaos. It creates problems. It doesn't avoid conflicts. It creates them. If you understood the freedom, you would understand that it's about conflict avoidance, not conflict creation, which is the state. So let me get to de la Boétie. He says, and this is what he says kind of on this basic topic about being essentially ruled, right? He says, and here's the quote, "If we led our lives according to the ways intended by nature and the lessons taught by her, we should be intuitively obedient to our parents. Later, we should adopt reason as our guide and become slaves to nobody." In regard to the political arena, after concluding that all tyranny rests on popular consent, La Boétie eloquently concludes that, here's the quote, "Obviously, there is no need of fighting to overcome this single tyrant, for he is automatically defeated if the country refuses consent to its own enslavement. Tyrants need not be expropriated by force. They need only be deprived of the public's continuing supply of funds and resources. The more one yields to tyrants," La Boétie points out, "the stronger and mightier they become. But if the tyrants are simply not obeyed, they become undone and as nothing." La Boétie then exhorts the poor, wretched, and stupid peoples to cast off their chains by refusing to supply the tyrant any further with the instruments of their own oppression. The tyrant indeed has nothing more than the power that you confer upon him to destroy you. Think about that. I mean, what a beautiful way of saying what's happening here. Something I haven't thrown into the mix that I just occurred to me, that the political philosophy of freedom is really the philosophy of peace. People say, well, if you don't like the way the system is, then you're advocating revolution. Yes, but not in the sense that most people understand the use of that word. Only peace, just exactly what I quoted from de la Boétie there, right? The revolution comes in your mind, right? And it comes in the understanding of your nature, of your freedom. That's how you will be set free. That if you refuse to cooperate with your enslavement, you will no longer be enslaved. It sounds crazy. You have to listen to more shows of the Annoying Peasant radio show to really gain the full context. But that's the effect of it. That is what we're really talking about. La Boétie goes on And he assures the masses that to overthrow, the tyrant, they need not act nor shed their blood. They can do so merely by willing to be free. He says, in short, resolve to serve no more, and you are at once freed. I do not ask that you place hands on the tyrant to topple him over, but simply that you support him no longer. Then you will behold him like a great colossus whose pedestal has been pulled away, fall of his own weight, and break in pieces. I cannot say it any better. I don't know if I've heard it any better. Think about that. And I know those are the people who say, hey, we got to have a strategy. What do we do? How do we do this? You free yourself. That's how everyone gets freed. You spread the word of freedom. So that was my giant crescendo. That was my, who was the guy on V for Vendetta? V, I guess. That's who it was. That was my crescendo. I hope, well, I guess in closing, I want to do a Ayn Rand quote, because she's been a subject of a lot of bashing in the media in recent history here. So to close the show, I want to do the quote from her. She says, the right to agree with others is not a problem in any society. Is the right to disagree that is crucial, right? We've done that, used that quote on the show before, but I think it's very important. Again, a lot of people don't want to hear what they don't agree with. Well, you cannot learn if you don't hear something new. Trust me, this process of becoming liberated can be difficult. Took me about a year of a lot of reading, a lot of learning, a lot of thinking. And I think you all have to do that. Everyone should do that, again, to understand your nature, basically. So in closing, you know, what we always say on the show is please tell your friends, heck, even tell your enemies about the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. We always can use more listenership. A fellow I met in Canada, his name is Paul. He has a show called the Political Paradox Podcast, of course, at politicalparadox.ca. Check out his podcast. He produces, I believe, terrestrial radio. He does a beautiful job on his show. Of course, listen to my buddy Paolo Fabrizio on Liberty Rules Radio. Check it out. Tonight, his show was, he was interviewing live on the show prostitutes and asking about their property right and if it should be legal, if it should not. He even encouraged people, what did he call it? Bible thumpers. Please call in and disagree with me. So he is very entertaining. He's over on Blog Talk Radio. Again, Google Liberty Rules Radio. He does an awesome job. And Apollo, if you happen to be listening, thanks for everything you do. As Brad likes to point out, we hope we provoked you to think. That's our aim here. Again, we don't think on the show that you can listen to one of these shows and you'll be ultimately convinced. Maybe those who are kind of already liberated, we can help convince them to go spread the word. Those of you who are on the fringe or may have just a passing interest, we hope we inspired you to think about it, and maybe you'll connect with us on the next show or follow the Facebook page. There's a lot of good things, and you never know. Over time, you may, in fact, liberate yourself. So that's what we aim to do, just get the conversation going. So with that, everybody, I'm going to close. Thanks so kindly for listening to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. We will have a new show for you next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central. This has been the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. Goodbye, everybody, and thanks for listening.